Broadcasting from New York City to the world, it's the G-Man Interviews.
Welcome. Dr. Matthew Fogg is a retired Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal with 32 years of public service and a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice. He's also the federal agent who challenged the U.S. Department of Justice and won. His District of Columbia federal court case in 1998, which resulted in a jury award of $4 million for exposing race discrimination and retaliatory tactics by the Department of Justice, was a landmark civil rights judgment against the agency. He has received major awards from the Director of the U.S. Marshals Service, the District of Columbia U.S. Attorney, and the Federal Bar Association for outstanding service above and beyond the call of duty, directing the arrest of over 300 of America's most wanted fugitives charged with murder, rape, child molestation, hate crimes, prison escape, terrorism, illegal drugs, and more in the U.S. and overseas. Marshal Fogg appeared in a 2015 episode of the G-Man Interviews to discuss racism in the U.S. Marshals Service and law enforcement agencies across the country. He is class agent in Fogg and Others versus Eric Holder / U.S. Department of Justice, pending before the U.S. EEO Commission, representing hundreds of black U.S. Marshals nationwide. He joins me to provide an overview of the case and the latest developments. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to the show, Dr. Fogg.
Hey, it's good to be back on your show.
Let's start at the beginning. What were some of the conditions and or situations within the U.S. Marshals Service that forced you and hundreds of black U.S. Marshals to take legal action?
Well, it's the basic, ageless crime in America, racism, basically discrimination and trying to overcome those barriers that have been in place ever since Africans were brought to these shores. And so it was ageless, and what happened was at some point you determine whether or not you can live with it or you can't live with it. And when you decide you can't live with it, then you fight against it. And once we start identifying particularly issues when it came down to promotions, disciplinary actions, and all of the policies and procedures were affected by that racism.
If memory serves me correctly, you testified before Congress and explained how you and other marshals were targeted after speaking out.
That's correct.
Have any official investigations been launched by ranking members of Congress?
No, none. Let me put it this way. When we spoke before the Congressional Black Caucus, at that time, Maxine Waters was the chair, and that was in 1997. When she sent us those letters saying, you guys show great courage in coming forward to tell your stories, and the public needs to hear about these incidents behind, the blue wall of silence, basically. I'm paraphrasing. But bottom line is, she looked into some of our issues, but there was never no real official investigation done by the Justice Department that I know of in reference to that. Now, I do know that the Justice Department did do an ad hoc committee report, and that's I have that, I think, on my website, and some things where the Justice Department did look into some of these issues, but not specifically because of the congressional inquiries.
Any idea as to why no official investigation has been conducted up to this point?
I just think it comes down to, again, it's institutionalized. It's considered, I guess you might say, the ageless crime that everybody accepts. Everybody says, we understand discrimination and racism is here, and they want to try to minimize it to single incidents instead of saying it is a systemic problem within the Justice Department. Now, once I received my verdict against the Department of Justice and the U.S. Marshals, now it became, officially saying this is a racial hostile environment. But again, I didn't see where they did any real investigative inquiries. It's been talk, it's been discussions and all of that. If you filed an EEO complaint, my complaint, there was investigations done specifically with my complaints or concerns. And even the Justice Department did admit to some discrimination. But the bottom line is to say a full-scale investigation has been done. No. We even have a class action in place right now, which is going through discovery, which is a form of investigative inquiries. But this is endemic or specific to, say, promotions and things of that nature. They took the retaliation piece out, which to me was very significant. But again, it's been an ongoing, long, arduous process, and there has been reports done, but it just doesn't seem like it's been any real assertive, effective action to take change.
Would you say incidents of discrimination against Black U.S. Marshals is much worse than when the first complaint was filed? And if so, could you provide a couple of examples?
Well, I don't know if it's worse. I'm just saying to you, I think that more folks have come forward. The fact that we have a class action now in place with my name on it, going all the way back to 1994, and I filed my complaint in 1985, and the ad hoc report was done between that time, 85 and 94, which was a report done by the director of the Marshals Service looking into discriminatory issues, and there was quite a few in there. And then we had a lot of egregious incidents that occurred while I was there. And so I would say that it's just ongoing. It's a hostile, what we call a racial hostile environment, where the incidents are occurring continuously.
According to online reports, there are 2 cases on record. One was filed back in 2008, and the other was filed by attorney Sanford Heisler in 2017.
That's correct.
How do they differ?
Well, the Sanford Heisler case, that is my case. That's the case where I'm the class agent. That's been going on technically since 1994. I filed that complaint in 94, but the agency dismissed it because they said when I brought my case in, I had a personal case against them as well as a class. Basically what I was saying was, look, all of the same things that are happening to me are happening to all of the other African Americans on the job. But at the same time, I took my case in the federal court, and that's the one I won in 1998. And then it ended up going on appeal for about 10 years, and finally they called themselves resolving it in 2008. But that was Matthew Fogg versus Department of Justice, myself personally. In the meantime, running, if you could say concurrent or, simultaneously, in 1994, I had filed a class indicating, again, that these were issues that was also systemic throughout the Marshals Service with other African Americans. Finally, I got Sanford Heisler and them to step in to assist me on the class action. I think that occurred around 2000. I want to say around 2000. See, when did Sanford step into this case? About 2005, 4 or 5, somewhere around that time. And I let them know, look, I got a class action sitting out here, and I need a firm that can handle it. And Sanford Heisler says, listen, we can handle this. And they started taking that and then started all the legal process at what we call the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So it's at the EEOC. So it's still considered administratively, whereas my case went in the federal court, my personal case, which once you go in the federal court, you go out of the administrative stage, and now you're in federal court process. So those were the 2 cases that, if I understand you correctly, the 2008 was the end results of the judgment on my personal case from the federal court. And then the Sanford Heisler case is still administratively going through the EEOC process, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission process. And it's in discovery right now.
I see. Thank you for clearing that up.
Sure.
In the wake of the suits being filed, has the Department of Justice done anything to address the problem? And if so, do you feel the measures they've taken are having an impact?
Let me put it this way, and the judge even said this. When I won my case in 98, during that 10 years of appeal to 2008, when they finally got the final judgment, that is indicative of to show you just how much the Justice Department wanted to dig in to keep from having a solid finding and fixing it. It was more like, let's just fight Marshal Fogg as long as we can, and maybe he'll just go away. Maybe he'll accept whatever we say. But the point was they dug in. They didn't want that finding on the record. So that was 10 years. Like anybody would think, you win a case. Why would it take 10 years before you get the judgment is carried out? So in that process, no, there's been nothing really significant. The thing that I would say did happen was when I won my case, they got a black director for the first time in the Marshals Service. They called themselves, I guess you might say, cosmetically doing some things, but when we look at the record now, we look at discovery, and we look at the fact that the class action has been in place, we can see now, as we get all this data is being collected and it's coming in, we can see that there's still been a lot of discrimination taking place in promotions and hiring and practices of the Marshals Service towards African Americans. That's the reason why the class action was actually certified. It had to take a judge to look at everything, administrative judge, and determine all the facts and say, yeah, we've got something here. There's something here that's worth looking into. It appears there is a class. It appears that there is some disparate impact. African Americans being treated differently, and so we must explore this, and that's where we are now. So to answer your question, trying to get to a solid answer is no. I don't. From what I've seen in Marshals, I've had some impact, but it still is continuous. It's almost like something that you say, if you don't watch it every day, it's still going to be there. The racism, people are being hired, people still have these bigoted thoughts and still have these ideas that, certain people shouldn't be in the positions where they are. And so you've constantly got this going on because this is sort of fabric of America. It's still, discrimination is still pretty much a major fabric in this country.
Why are you and the other marshals confident that a judgment will be rendered in your favor? As you've publicly stated many times, you're dealing with a, quote, good old boy network.
Right. Well, again, it's saying, will the system rule against itself? I mean, you have a system that is perpetuating itself. I mean, you would think that, okay, you get a lot of people in this country, they'll say, well, those things happened back during slavery and post-construction and all of that, and we don't have that today. Well, you have to be somebody black walking in a black person's shoes. That's like me trying to say what women should or should not have. I'm not a woman. So to feel what they feel and to understand what they got to go through. With the same thing with people of color. I see a lot of situations and things that are occurring every day in this field that says it's almost, you don't want to become apathetic, but you say, wow, this is just something that is a continuous war against evil, war against something that stays in place. So I don't know if I could say that think a judgment will help it. I just can say that a judgment does its part for the moment, but you always have to be vigilant. You never can give up. You never, as the Jews say, never forget. You don't forget. You can't, because this is the fabric of America, and it is what it is, whether anybody wants to accept it or not. When I came on the Marshals Service, and this is the U.S. Department of Justice, we are the front runners on getting rid of discrimination, and I found out that, wow, it's in the federal government. And you got to have, that's the reason why we have the EEOC Commission, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and things that set up to say, it's supposed to be watchdog groups to say, how do we abate this stuff and get people back into where, we're looking at people for the content of their character and not the color of their skin. I mean, how do we get to that point?
If a judgment is not rendered in your favor, will you and the marshals file an appeal?
You mean, say, for example, if the class action was not rendered in favor, I'm sure there would be an appeal filed. I mean, right now they're just trying to get this thing to have a judgment, but and then this stuff takes so long. I mean, even with my case, by my personal case, so many things have occurred even after, when people thought, wow, I thought this was over, Matthew. I thought your case was done. And then so many other things the government has done to keep it wide open, to keep me having to go back and file again and get attorneys and have to go back in a process of challenging things that are happening now.
Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, I just want to say that, when we talk about law enforcement and all of the stuff that's going on in law enforcement, and this doesn't matter where you are, Marshals Service, local police department, state police, it doesn't matter. You always have to have watchdogs watching the watchdogs. It's like organized crime. I mean, when you got law enforcement, when it gets out of control, that is organized crime. And so if you don't have something to abate that and bring it into accountability, it will get further and further out of control. It's not something that will fix itself. And therefore, you always have to have civilian and oversight and law enforcement organizations, because if I'm complaining about them doing these internal stuff and I work with them and they're doing it to me, you can't imagine how much they will do it to the public. And the public has to understand that. This is what we call, if anything, I'd say a threat to our security, to the nation's security and everything else. When you got law enforcement that has these practices and it's coming from the top down, then the public is at risk, because if I can't trust somebody working next to me who might be a bigot with a badge, which is going to be the name of my book, or doing something against me, then imagine what they're going to do to the public. They will plant drugs on them. They will lie. They get on the stand and test the lie and do any of those things. And people are going to believe the cop, the officer, because they're going to think this is somebody of moral integrity or high integrity, instead of understanding they've been bought and sold. If they're in a system that is perpetuating corruption, perpetuating discrimination, whether it's something you might figure you can just get away with, you just say whatever you want to say when it comes down to the public, because you want to get your arrest up, you want to look good in front of the public, and so you just do something to a citizen when you know it's not the truth. All I'm saying is that stuff, it just grows. It doesn't fix itself unless there's some type of oversight, constantly watching it and making certain that these law enforcement officers and these people are doing the right thing.
Thank you for being here, sir. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
As always, I thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, stay cool, stay safe, and stay informed.